you will find yourselves on the path to becoming international secret agents. In other words, Psychonauts. The rest of you will die!
Unlike in my last review with Grim Fandango, the recording for this video captured my first time playing Psychonauts. Although it's another title made by Double Fine Productions, and my thoughts towards them should be clear from my previous video, I'd never taken the opportunity to play Psychonauts till now. Something about its concept kept me on the fence for a good few years, clearly, as I first purchased it on Steam back in 2016. Principally, adventure titles like these have to draw me in with their gameplay. Whether the aesthetic is well executed and engaging won't interest me as much as whether its level design is infectious. If I don't get that initial captivation, I won't continue playing for long. And up until recently, I'd seen little to draw me in when it came to playing Psychonauts. In fact, I hadn't really come across much discussion about the game at all. It certainly has its own cult following, if you go looking for it, but whereas games like Jet Set Radio, Battletoads and Nier have all grown a steady fan base into major followings over the years since their release dates of yore, I can't say I've seen the same trend for Psychonauts. In reality, it's very likely I'm just catching up on a scene that I've very much been out of the loop of. After all, Tim Schafer and the team at Double Fine are set to release their sequel to Psychonauts in 2021, funded in part due to the increased sales when Psychonauts was ported onto commerce platforms like Steam and GOG. And from the trailer and promotional materials so far, the follow-up looks like a really interesting title, and was the main reason I wanted to give the original a shot. So, let's talk about where it all began. The game's premise introduces us to Whispering Rock Psychic Summer Camp, where young minds come to learn the psychic arts from an enigmatic society of psychic agents. Raz, short for Rasputin and our rookie player protagonist, infiltrates the campground after running away from the circus and his family. Having displayed his innate psychic ability, he's accepted into the camp as one of its newest students. He's come here to train his mind and join the ranks of the titular Psychonauts, a kind of world police force who use mental magic to protect the planet. But that's all information that's broad and contextual, something that is only teased at in the game's final act, and will likely be explored in the sequel. What we're really focused on is the messed up things that are brewing behind the scenes during the summer. It's an extremely peculiar and unique premise, another reason it took so long for me to get engaged with it, but you should expect no less when it's coming from the mind of Tim Schafer. The story behind Psychonauts is something of an oddity. It starts off at a slow and frankly dull pace, exploring a small campground, introducing yourself to a peculiar bunch of kids who'll quickly become irrelevant after the game's initial hours, save for a few tangential conversations along the way. It's in this starting zone, however, that the game teases you with a taste of what's to come in the ensuing hours. In training to become a Psychonaut, you'll not only unlock psychic abilities, but you'll also have the opportunity to access and explore the cerebral realms of other people's minds. Rather than returning to these mindscapes as soon as possible, Raz will have to explore the campground for a bit, gating off the levels by some arbitrary exploration and resource collection. These places are barren of interesting or engaging mechanics, but simply serve as a space to acquire collectibles and pass through filler conversations with your fellow psychic cadets. These sections feel disconnected from the core experience and rather trite. After all, unlocking new abilities comes naturally by following the story through to its completion, so encouraging you down these low-res paths seemed like a waste of time. I imagine it felt more fun to play around with its mechanics a decade ago, especially the mind ball traversal, jumping up to great heights and distances and levitating down to hidden areas, but now it just comes across as a boring experience. These first few hours of gameplay set the tone for something which the game won't even become, to its benefit in fact. Thankfully, something about the mysticism of Psychonauts' popularity made me power through these hours, and I'm certainly glad for it. The real bulk of the game begins once you're infiltrating the mind of your campground instructors. The best way I can think of describing these levels is that they're something like a cross between the mind infiltration of Christopher Nolan's Inception, looking for hidden pieces of your target's psyche to beat the guardians of their mind, called sensors in this game, and Atlas's Persona series, where the deepest recesses of their minds alter the reality of the dreaming world. Raz has to clamber through the unconscious of his friends and enemies to unlock their secrets, but more importantly, to train his own mental powers. Fire, levitation, strength and size manipulation, and so much more. These cerebral worlds are where the developers really play with the power of what the gaming medium can offer. Of particular note are the levels The Milkman Conspiracy and Waterloo World. These are the minds belonging to the mentally damaged and reflect that. In the head of the Milkman, everyone is part of a grand conspiracy, out to find his hidden whereabouts, whose delivery of milk will cause some kind of revelation. It doesn't make a great deal of sense, nor should it. His mind is in tatters. The world is literally cracked and fragmented, suspended in the air and jutting out at contrasting angles. Supposedly innocuous G-men litter the streets, hiding in plain sight as various neighbours, workmen, and also assassins. Their dry, monotone dialogue is simply superb.
I am making a pie.
Hello, welcome to my house. Please stay and make pie. My stories are about to come on.
I am making a pie.
I hope you are not trying to steal my husband, tramp.
Traversing the level, masquerading as these suburban caricatures, is good fun and simple to get your head around. It's here where the game's 3D geometry and spherical design excels, as jumping across these divides boggles the mind as to what physics in this kind of environment should feel like. The gravity is a joy to mess around with, and perfectly fits the tone of the milkman's frayed mind. On the other hand, the mind of Fred Bonaparte, distant relation of Napoleon, sees you fight his battles on a Catan-style board game, shrinking up and down into various fronts of the conflict. Like Gulliver discovering the Lilliputians, you stomp around from place to place, arming soldiers and disposing of obstacles, set up to the small-statured general himself. All done to dispose of Fred's ego and free him from the game. I think why I enjoy these two levels so much is because they use mechanics that are sparsely used elsewhere in the game, so they feel fresh and engaging throughout. And the majority of the game is jam-packed with this kind of design ethic, considering what would be the most entertaining way of expressing this cerebral world, and making it work for each mind's context. Most of all, I really enjoy that it goes to some really messed up places. At first, it was hard to pinpoint the intended audience for this game. Its tutorial and mechanics are very hand-holdy. Everything looks a little bit toyish and very utopian. But then I overheard two kids saying this.
Let me go!
What to do with small bully assistant?
Geez, I don't know. Could you put him in that deadly Nelson you were talking about?
Could. On such tiny opponent, all blood might drain out ear holes.
Ah!
It kind of unnerved me. It would be another couple of hours later when, infiltrating the mind of Mila Vadella, one of our campground staff members, when I discovered a hidden room in her psyche. Now, the game had already introduced us up to this point the mechanic of cracking these safes within people's minds to get to the access of their secrets and unconscious thoughts. But what I discovered this time was positively unnerving.
Now you definitely don't want to go in there. That's a party killer. I have my nightmares under control. These things contribute to a world of pain.
Right, so those were burning, screaming children. This is still pretty early on. We were just learning how to jump on psychic space hoppers a minute ago. It's pretty messed up. The game doesn't even bring it up again. We're just supposed to live with this knowledge from now on. Heck, the rest of the level is us ascending a club where people are dancing and having a good time tripping on LSD or something. Meanwhile, I'm just thinking about Timmy's screams. It's from here on that the game matures a bit. In the second half of the game, when the writing becomes more candid and the jokes more piercing, and, unsurprisingly, I started to enjoy my time with the game far more. The levels are far more experimental, their dialogue including greater pathos, and the underlying tone far grimmer than where we began. I can't say whether this discordance from the first and second half of the game were intentional, but I can say I'd honestly prefer if we reached this point sooner, because now I'm just having way too much fun. These areas aren't any less playful. In fact, I'd say quite the opposite. It feels like I'm inside Neil Gaiman's head right now, having buttons stitched into my eyes. Despite releasing in 2005 and having no official remaster, the game supports a native resolution of 1440p, and in places looks as good, if not better, than Grim Fandango's remastered visuals. This is thanks to the work that took place when Double Fine ported over the game after the expiration of their contract with their first publishers back in 2011. Textures haven't seen a great deal of treatment, and environments often suffer the worst visual transition from in between the ports, especially the campground, which looks downright awful. And yet other levels can look stunningly beautiful at times. It depends how far things have been stretched to try and reach these resolutions. Black Velvetopia is a particular favourite. Invariably, places also look far worse. When the camera pans outside of Raz's field of view, or some element in the world comes in between Raz and the camera, the old textures are filtered above the crisp resolution, and it can often look quite poor. This isn't helped by a poor camera system to begin with. These poor visuals also appear between the transition between gameplay and menu screens. You can't really fault the game for this though. It would take a full remaster to address these issues, and if it runs at a consistent FPS and remains intact at its resolution, then it's enough to support the narrative beneath it. Similar to Grim Fandango, the cinematics bear the sign of their age. Very washed out colours and low-res animations, which don't look very attractive. The in-game cutscenes are far more engaging as a result. And also, unfortunately, the sound mix is often out of balance in the game. There is even a scene in the game where the developers nod their head to this.
So who's that crying?
Oh, sorry. Hey, can we kill the waterworks for a second? Thanks. It's a recording. It helps me focus.
So it seems peculiar that so many different areas should suffer from this bad mix. It seems all the more strange given how excellent this area was in Grim. I think I might just be spoiled from listening to soundtracks from the likes of composer Darren Korb and anything put out by Supergiant Games of late. All in all, I understand why so many people cherish this title. When it's in its stride, delving into the really bizarre recesses of delusion and consciousness, and letting you bend those realities in exciting ways, well, I haven't experienced much like it in all my years playing games. The gripes I have with the game come mostly from a technological standpoint, and those that aren't are down to design features that have aged poorly in the preceding years, and no longer benefit the gameplay experience. All I can say now is, I'm excited to see where Double Fine takes Psychonauts in the future. It'll be weird playing a game of theirs close to its release. Maybe I'll make a review of it in 2030 to stay on trend. I'll be departing from Double Fine in my next video into something more open world, but I'm sure I'll return to them later. Something like Costume Quest would seem appropriate for this time of year, maybe in 2021. Thanks for watching.
And what are you and the wee one up to on this lovely day?
Oh, just obeying the law as always. All posted directives followed to the letter.
Ah, good to hear. Not a one of us want any trouble, that's for sure.